Our next session, the role of public diplomacy in times of war and crisis, value versus norm, examines the evolving landscape of international relations where diplomacy must reconcile conflicting values, shifting power dynamics, and humanitarian concerns. Hosted by Yonsei EU Center of Excellence, this session will analyze how public diplomacy can effectively leverage to foster peace, counter misinformation, and strengthen global solidarity during crisis. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Yeonho Lee, Director of Yonsei EU Center of Excellence, who will introduce the panelists for the session.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. Let me begin the session. In my view, globally, the tension and the conflict are rising, particularly in the area of security and international trade. But as a result of that, the voice of each government is becoming louder. By contrast, the voice of the private sector, including academia and also business and the international NGOs, are becoming smaller and smaller. And also, unfortunately, the multilateralism have stopped working smoothly recently. So, and also what I find is that global community, diplomatic community, and then politicians, they very eagerly talk about national interest. However, they hardly talk about values and norms and anymore. So, but in my view, in the times of crisis and conflict, I think the multilateralism is more important, particularly from the perspective of the middle power countries, including South Korea. And also, we need to talk about public diplomacy. So that is the purpose of our session. We are going to listen to two important the presentations. One is on the democratic resilience in the times of turbulence, in times of crisis and conflict, because I think the freedom is important, but at the same time, democratic values are quite important as well. Democratic values are talking about the equity and also philanthropy and the position of the weak. So liberty issue and equity must be balanced. Therefore, we need to talk about democratic resilience. And also, we need to talk about the role of the public diplomacy. As Professor Che rightly pointed out, we need a very strategic communication between the countries to tackle the issue of the conflict and turbulence. So in order to re-emphasize the importance of the public diplomacy, I have suggested this important session. For the purpose, I have invited very decorating, very important and honorable three guests from overseas and from the academia and also diplomatic stage. Firstly, I have invited former Minister Imants Ligis of Latvia. He is you are going to see him sooner or later he's going to participate in the conference through the online. He used to be a minister of the Ministry of Defense of Latvia, and also he was a NATO ambassador. He has a career not only as a government official and as a diplomat and also as a politician. He's going to give us a talk titled the democratic resilience in the times of conflict and crisis. And also I have invited Professor Choi Jong-gon. He's a professor in the Department of Political Science. But he used to be the vice minister of the foreign ministry, and he's going to give us a talk about the role of the public diplomacy. And also I have invited former Korean ambassador to Latvia, Ambassador Lee Dong-gyu. He is in my knowledge, the most renowned specialist on the issue of the environment and climate change issue in South Korea. So he just came back from Latvia to participate in this conference. May I say that? Okay, we have invited 3 guests. By the way, I'm Yeon Lee, professor in the Department of Political Science and also head of the Jung Moon-Ayu Center. I'm going to be the chair of the conference. Please give them a big round of applause to presenters. Okay, let me begin by listening to a presentation. Minister Imant Legis. He's going to give us a talk through online. For your information, I'm going to allocate about 15 minutes for each presenters and 10 minutes for the discussant. And later, I'm going to open the panel to the floors. I see many of the student participants here. They have a curiosity, and also they want to eagerly join in our conversation. So let me invite the Minister Imant Legis. He's going to give us a talk for about 15 minutes. Please.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor, and it's a great honor for me to be participating with you today in your conference. As you mentioned, I will be speaking about Latvia's experience in strengthening democratic resilience in the face of security challenges. This will be the main area of my discussion today, the main focus. I'll also then touch on a couple of other topics towards the end, and they are lessons for enhancing multilateral cooperation between regions and the perspectives of the role of the value-based diplomacy in global security in fostering ties between regions in the current geopolitical climate. So if we look at the Latvian experience in strengthening democratic resilience, really we have faced a variety of security challenges over the last 35 years. We in Latvia regained our independence in 1991, but it's clear that there have been turbulent times since then. I want to look at how our experience has been in the past and how the experience has helped in strengthening the democratic resilience of the nation. And I'm going to take 3 particular periods. The first one will be the period from 1995, and then from 1995 to 2004, and then from 2004 up until today. So, as I mentioned, Latvia regained its freedom through a peaceful singing revolution, as it was called, in 1991. And this was a process of mass protests where civic society was mobilized and our independence was restored, and we broke away from the occupation of Moscow, the Soviet Union, where we had been illegally incorporated for half a century. So the major challenge in 1991, when we regained our freedom and were recognized once again as independent countries, was to get the removal of foreign troops, post-Soviet troops, from our territory. Because, of course, this was the major item on the agenda for many countries in the region, which had been occupied militarily and otherwise. And so we did reach an agreement that the troops would be removed by 1994. But in fact, the vestiges of this occupation were to finish on the 4th of May 1995, when we had the blowing up of a radar station which had been used by the Soviets and had been based in Latvia. So in 1995, the army and the military installations had all gone. Clearly, apart from these challenges about the presence of the armed forces, we also faced significant economic challenges relating to withdrawing our currency from the Soviet ruble. We introduced a Latvian ruble, and then in a short period of time, we then moved into our own Latvian currency. There were various challenges which made society more resilient during this process. So after the disappearance of the military presence, post-1995, we were able to define our foreign policy goals. And essentially, these related to integration into Euro-Atlantic structures. And here I'm talking, of course, about joining the European Union and NATO. We realized that these processes would indeed improve our security situation. But in order to achieve these ends, to join these institutions, we had to comply with very high democratic standards relating to the rule of law, relating to human rights, and so we had to go through a very speedy process involved in this integration into both institutions, especially if we look at the European Union. But at the same time, we were having to deal with a massive propaganda and information war from Moscow, which related primarily to the unfounded allegations of so-called mistreatment of Russians in our country, of ethnic Russians. And this was where the role of Latvian public diplomacy had to work very hard to contend and to cope with these unfounded allegations, which is really an ongoing process even today. But I think it's important to bear in mind that during the whole of the 35-year period from 1991 until today, we have never had any problems, any conflicts based on ethnic difficulties or ethnic challenges. And indeed, we have become specialists on questions of strategic communication, public diplomacy. We have what's called a NATO Center of Excellence on Strategic Community, which is based in Latvia. So if we then look at the period since we joined NATO and the European Union, this took place just over almost 21 years ago in 2004. So what was important for the resilience of society was to prove that we were contributors to these organizations. And if I look specifically, because I'm more of an expert on security and defense matters, if I look at the question of our contributions to NATO, well, we were able to contribute in a small way by sending our soldiers to participate in operations in the Balkans region of Europe, and also in a region which is closer to your country, and that is Afghanistan and Iraq, where after the 11th of September 2001 attacks on the United States, for the first time in NATO history, Article 5 was enacted. That's the Mutual Defense Clause, and members of NATO were asked to join these operations. Well, we joined the operations already before we formally became a member of NATO in 2004. And if you look at the process of what was happening in global security at the time, NATO's essence was to say that, look, NATO has to deal with operations out of area or else they go out of business. And so this was why NATO was involved in the founding, trying to improve democracy globally. You know, one could debate the success of this. We were engaged in that. But of course, this situation of NATO's focus on democratic building and dealing with the attacks against terrorism changed very much after 2014 and Russia's first military attack on Ukraine, where it was realized within the alliance that there was a need to focus once again on the collective defense of countries. So NATO has become more inward-looking and dealing with the collective defense of its member states, where Latvia and the countries that border Russia, the eastern flank or frontline states, have presence of other NATO members on their country to protect and defend and deter from the enemy next door to us. So that's a brief overview of where we stand today and our position. Of course, the big items on the agenda for us strategically from the security perspective today is giving very active civilian and military and political support to Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for Europe's freedom and sovereignty and independence, and that's why it is crucial, even at this period of time while we're speaking today, that this support from Western democracies continues, especially where we see a slightly unsure situation globally and around us. So we are, as Latvia, heading amongst the group that is supporting Ukraine. We are leading with the United Kingdom something called a drone coalition, sending drones to help in Russia's war against Ukraine. We're also allocating 0.25% of our defense budget, or GDP, sorry, towards supporting Ukraine. And at the same time, we're also building up, obviously, our own defense. We are this year allocating 3.45% of GDP to defense. And a political decision, even over the last few weeks, has been made to raise this to 4% and 5% in the coming years. In parallel, over the last 10 years, of course, we have faced a financial crisis in 2009 and the COVID-19 pandemic crisis in 2020, 2019, 2020. So these are the issues that have made society more resilient and have indicate the challenges that we have faced. A few words on perhaps comparing the Latvia's situation with Korea's situation. We, of course, both share a land border with authoritarian neighbor who is unpredictable and threatens the region. For Latvia, we share a border with Belarus and Russia. And of course, the lesson is that it's necessary to fortify geographical borders, the physical border, and engage with our allies to strengthen our defense and deterrence. And I think that's a common feature that we face. Secondly, of course, your region faces a large power, China, which also is looking very closely at the outcome of how our regional large power, Russia, proceeds with its war. So I think it's important for both of our countries to keep close track of what is called the no-limit cooperation between China and Russia and the possible outcome of Russia's war against Ukraine, especially the implications that this may have for China and its regional aggression. Thirdly, it's clear that Russia and China have joint interests in, first of all, destroying the rule-based world order which relies on global organizations. They're also jointly interested in undermining the US hegemonic role in global affairs, and they are interested in splitting the alliances, whether the alliance is NATO or whether it's the cooperation between the United States and Europe, and that is their joint purpose. So the lessons from that, to my mind, is that we need to constantly remind about rules and values to keep the global organizations operable. We need to strengthen our links and keep close links as far as that's possible with the United States, despite the challenges that we currently face. And thirdly, we need to keep in close contact with our regional partners and allies to strengthen security if the links with the United States slacken. Fourthly, I think both of our countries have a certain reliance on the United States, and that this reliance is being questioned as there are perhaps moves away from the values and rule-based order, and regrettably we see more the question of might is right coming into operation. So in this respect, I think it's important for both Latvia and South Korea to discreetly, continually remind about these values and rules and point out to our American partners that they also face challenges from China, North Korea, not to mention Iran and other autocracies. We are, of course, linked through NATO by the NATO and Indo-Pacific 4 cooperation, and of course Latvia on a practical level is unable to engage militarily in the region, but we do offer political support both to the United States, and we're obviously engaged through NATO in this type of cooperation. So in my closing remarks, I'd just like to say that it's important to hold on to the value-based diplomacy and respect for rule-based international system by staying united. We have one of the greatest challenges at the moment is retaining unity. Of course, for countries that of our size, we have to rely on these systems to protect ourselves and to increase our security. Latvia is taking a concrete step by applying to become a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. There will be an important vote in a couple of months about this, and that will be our contribution as well. And in closing, let me say that, of course, the next few years we're going to be facing challenges of with our major strategic partner risking becoming a strategic liability concerning this question of upholding values. But at the end of the day, I think it is important to pause and reflect on the emerging disasters. And in this context, I want to just quote something that was for Latvia an historic occasion. Last week, we received our first Oscar award in the Hollywood film ceremony, and this was received by an animated film called Flow, I would, as an advertisement, I'd recommend that you see this film. It was an independent film produced in Latvia in collaboration with Belgian and French studios, and on accepting the award, the director of this film said, "We are all in the same boat and we need to cooperate." And that, I think, is a message that I'd like to close with. And once again, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to engaging in discussions.
Thank you. Thank you. Minister Ligis has addressed Latvia's recent and ongoing effort to defend democratic norms, particularly the rule of law in the times of war and crisis. Thank you, and also I would like to congratulate on your Oscar award winning of the film. Okay, let me turn to, as a next speaker, let me turn to Professor 최종건. He's going to give us a talk about the role of the public diplomacy in the times of turbulence. Please welcome him with a big applause.
Thank you very much. Very good to be joined by Professor Lee, Minister Ligis, and also Ambassador Lee as well. Such a beautiful day to be in the basement anyhow, but we'll do our best now. My topic is basically about the critical role of public diplomacy in times of war and crisis. Obviously, public diplomacy has emerged as an indispensable instrument of statecraft. And if I recall my time working in the foreign ministry, obviously about 30 to 40% of my time as a vice minister, we really needed to spend a lot of time engaging foreign audience directly, shaping perceptions and fostering mutual understanding and building relationships that can withstand political turbulences during wartime and crisis. And especially during war and crisis, information becomes as powerful as military forces. Narratives determines alliances. Misinformation fuels conflicts. And strategic communication decide the fate of nations. Public diplomacy plays a crucial role in shaping global narratives, countering disinformations, and ensuring that a nation's position is understood, respected, and supported. One of the most striking examples of public diplomacy in wartime is something that we are seeing right now. That's Ukraine's response to Russia's invasion. President Zelensky has effectively used what I see as public diplomacy to mobilize international support, addressing foreign parliaments, mobilizing global audiences via social media, and engaging in direct outreach that has resulted in military aid, sanctions against Russia, and humanitarian assistance for their own citizens. A lot of things. And most of all, strengthened international alliances in coping with their wartime hardship. Similarly, public diplomacy serves as a soft power tool that upholds nations' moral authority. The global community, including European Union and some of our Asian countries here in this part of the world, have framed their support for Ukraine as defense of democracy, defense of sovereignty, and defense of our value and our way of life against Russia, which symbolizes as what? Authoritarianism, reinforcing their credibility and legitimacy. This demonstrates how public diplomacy not only influences short-term policy responses, but sustains longer-term alliances by aligning narratives with universal value that we believe in. Public diplomacy plays a critical role in mobilizing humanitarian assistance, shaping public opinion and leading to policy decisions that facilitated refugee resettlement, for example. This exemplifies how public diplomacy extends beyond just simply messaging to create tangible humanitarian and global outcomes. Despite its importance of public diplomacy, we have several challenges in times of crisis, particularly. The first is disinformation warfare. States and non-state actors actively manipulate information to distort reality, spread falsehoods, and erode credibility. Russia's disinformation campaigns regarding Ukraine, for example, have aimed to justify aggressions and generate confusions. Countering such narratives require proactive and fact-based communications. Another challenge is public skepticism. If governments use public diplomacy as mere propaganda rather than a tool of transparent engagement with the public, foreign and domestic, they risk losing both domestic and international trust. So to be effective, wisdom is very simple. You need to be very transparent and you need to be very honest. In other words, public diplomacy must be grounded in truth, consistency, transparency, and authenticity. Additionally, different audiences require tailored messaging. A message that resonates in Europe may not be effective, for example, in Korea or Asia. Understanding cultural and political nuances is essential for crafting messages that connect with diverse global audiences. I think that South Korea offers a very interesting cases. I think our country offers a compelling case in effective public diplomacy during crisis. One of the most notable examples was its strategy during 2018 Pyeongchang International Olympic season. By inviting North Koreans, athletes and officials, South Korea transformed the event itself into a platform for peace, easing inter-Korean tensions at a time of heightened military threats. This initiative not only strengthened South Korea's position as a mediator, but also demonstrated how public diplomacy can create diplomatic breakthroughs that extend beyond symbolic gestures. Another key example is how South Korea strategically used our resilience during the COVID-19 era. Through transparency, technological innovation, and humanitarian aid, South Korea emerged as a global model for pandemic management. Therefore, we had our own authentic brand called K-Quarantine. If we remember those such painful time about 4 to 5 years ago. South Korea's public diplomacy efforts during that time extended beyond crisis management. We showcased our ability in terms of technological capabilities, governance strength, and commitment to global solidarity. I believe public diplomacy will be much more important for the time to come because we have a problem, and the problem will not be easily solved, not only because of what's going on in the United States, but also we have a lot of challenges elsewhere. As global conflicts intensify, the world becomes increasingly polarized, the role of public diplomacy will only grow in importance. I think there are three key trends that will shape the future of public diplomacy. First, digital diplomacy. Digital diplomacy will transform how states engage with global audiences. Governments must invest in AI-driven tools for sentiment analysis, misinformation detection, and personalized diplomatic messaging. Social media will remain a battleground for influence, and nations that effectively navigate this space will shape global discourse. Second, non-state actors, including global corporations, civil society groups, and cultural influencers, will play a greater role in public diplomacy because we have a totally different spaces for social media environment. Companies like Starlink, for example, and Apple have already influenced global conflicts, and K-pop fandoms have engaged in digital activism, shaping international narratives on social justice issues and climate changes and things like that. Governments, or I guess we must recognize and collaborate with these actors to amplify their diplomatic efforts. Finally, public diplomacy must be adaptable. Whether responding to climate disasters, cyber threats, or humanitarian crisis, or war in Ukraine, nations must maintain agility in their engagement strategies. For South Korea, this means expanding its cultural diplomacy as well, also strengthening partnership with developing nations, and also positioning ourselves as a leader in innovation, peace mediation, and climate action. I realize I've got still 1 minute, so my message out to you is very simple. When it comes down to public diplomacy, we tend to focus our attention on how to craft a message and then how to disseminate through social media and have a conference like this and then directly engage with the audience. But I think it's more than that. It is about shaping the international landscape in ways that protect national interests first and promote global stability through the norms that we share as well. In a world where information is weaponized, trust me when I said this, information is weaponized. Public diplomacy must be strategic, credible, transparent, and above all, adaptable. For South Korea, we have big challenges ahead, especially time like this. I think the foundation of South Korea's diplomatic power or strength comes from our trust in democracy. So for time ahead, I think that our democratic resilience, whether we are able to overcome this time of political crisis at home, will essentially determine how attractive, how credible, and how trustworthy our countries will become. You know, many people talk about economic power. Many people talk about military strength. But at the end of the day, our so-called competitiveness comes down to whether we can overcome this democratic crisis through very peaceful means. With that, I'd like to conclude my remark. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Chair very succinctly summarized and explained the role of the public diplomacy, importance of the public diplomacy, particularly in the times of turbulence. Let me turn to our discussant, Ambassador Dong-Kyu Lee. I'm going to give him about 10 minutes. Then I'm going to open the floor and open the session to the floor. So particularly, I would like to invite the questions and comments from the students while listening to Ambassador Lee's discussion. Please think about very insightful questions. I expect those questions from you. Okay, please welcome Ambassador Dong-Kyu Lee as a discussant.
Thank you, Professor Lee. I am very honored to be here in this panel discussion. Minister Imans was my friend in Latvia, and also the Professor Choi was my boss when I was working as a Director General for climate change and energy issues. I think two countries share some historical and geopolitical situations. So I think we can easily understand each other. And the subject of today's discussion is about some democratic resilience and also disinformation. I was born in divided Korean Peninsula, and relatively I am very good and understand some Soviet-style propaganda, authoritarian propaganda. And I served 2 years in Latvia and observed the problem of this disinformation issues related to the Ukraine and some border of the Russian. Minister Imans rightly pointed out the problem of ethnic issues in Latvia. It's also same in the Ukraine situation. So we should understand the crisis of some disinformation issues and the propaganda issues in current era. I'm afraid maybe we are now observing the collapse of a democratic society. Just 1 week ago, I read an article in the Financial Times. Martin Wolf, one of the main contributors of the Financial Times, he said, the West is now dead. So we have to approach these issues with kind of some urgencies and feeling of the crisis. Also, I'm totally agree with the Professor Choi's comments about the importance of the disinformation in the era of the crisis, in time of the war. Maybe in the past, most of us who are living in a democratic society believed someday the truth, democracy will win against some authoritarian regimes. But now I'm not sure about this belief. We are observing disinformation and some false fact, fake news prevailing our society. So we need kind of rebuild our strategy. How we can against this current change and our problem. Minister Imans also mentioned about some stratcom, strategic communication, and Professor Choi also stressed the importance of the strategic communication. We cannot let disinformation prevail our society. We have to build some strategic communication to counterattack the current issue of the discommunication. Without this kind of systematic approach, I'm not sure we cannot protect our society from the attack of the authoritarian regime. Maybe to understand the problem, we can check the two cases, Ukraine issues and also some Israel and the Palestine issues. In our society, there are kind of some inclination to understand these two big current international crises. One, Ukraine. Sometimes we doubt about some legitimacy of the Ukraine current government. Someone said the president of the Ukraine is a dictator. It's so effective and a very good, maybe not good, communication to provoke some doubts in our society. But about the Israel and the Palestine issues, always there are some good rationale to protect some Israel, the Jewish community from the past repress, from the some totalitarian regimes. All this kind of I'm not sure I can call it the prejudice or some information, but sometimes we have to check. We have to check what kind of strategy or what kind of a policy behind this kind of information influence our understanding. Currently now I'm catching my reading. I'm now in the middle of reading the Yuval Harari, the Nexus. He mentioned about the characteristic of the populist regime. One of the main characteristic is manipulating the fact. For the authoritarian regime, populist regimes, the fact or truth is not important. And Yuval Harari stressed our belief someday the truth will win or prevail the disinformation. We have to take more strategic position to tackle this problem, these information issues. So I am totally agree with what mentioned by the Minister Imans and the Professor Choi. Based on today's panel discussion, we have to think about how we can more strategically approach these information issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Lee. Now it is time to open the session to the floor. Any question or comments from, yes, please. And you, next.
Thank you very much for the wonderful discussions and presentations. Professor Choi mentioned that the so-called digital diplomacy is getting more and more critical and prominent in public diplomacy. But I'm afraid that the gap of digital and technological development between developing countries and developed countries is getting bigger. So what might be some challenges that developing countries are facing nowadays due to the emergence of digital diplomacy? And how can these obstacles be overcome, especially regarding real-life cases? And as Professor Lee mentioned, fake news, do you believe that these digital diplomacies is closely intertwined with fake news? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for great insight. And I want to ask some question that to Dong-Kyu Lee. What are the conditions of strategic communication to counteract the disinformation? Thank you.
I want to invite one more question before we hear the answers. Yes, please. Yeah. You're going to be the next after her. Yes. Oh, yes.
Thank you very much for the speeches. I wanted to ask a question to the President, Dr. Imans, about, I was wondering that, you mentioned about the bonds to the rule-based world to to counteract to the fake news and disinformation. But the thing is, even the United States, especially the new administration, and not only China and Russia, but also the rest of the world, also has disinformation problems. So I was wondering if the bonds to the United States and global alliance censoring NATO's is the realistic solution to counteract disinformation problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. I think there will be more questions. Before I give you a chance to raise questions, let's hear their answers, their response first. Then I will come back to you again. Okay. Professor, would you like to start? And Ambassador Lee and Minister Legis is going to answer respectively. Thank you. It sounds like an exam question.
Quite contrary to our perceptions, I think that digital divide, so-called, haves and not haves, I think it's increasingly shortened. I mean, the gap is not widening because of, ironically, our technological innovation and development itself lower the price of producing hardware. And also, if you go to so-called developing nations, it is quite surprising to see many, almost more than half of the population are enjoying their access to cell phone and smartphone, things like that. Why? It got a lot cheaper. And then also, information that they're enjoying through their smartphones. They spend a lot of time looking at Facebooks and Instagram and Twitter, or now called X, and their own indigenous social media platform anyhow. And if you look at what's going on in Ukraine, even during wartime, things like Starlink provides free airtime internet anyhow. So it's not about infrastructure per se. It gets more increasingly about how you manipulate or govern such network in times of crisis and wartime. Thereby, you want to get your message out there and so-called educate your target audiences and make sure that they empathize or sympathize with you. So I think that it's a really, really massive, i.e. public diplomacy, but realistically it's information warfare anyhow. So, so digital divide still exists, but yet the governments and states and international community want you to have access to digital infrastructure anyhow. So I think the gap is essentially shortening or closing it down.
Oh, thank you. The audience that reminds me that I forgetting mention the importance of AI and digital technology in public diplomacy. Nowadays, the development AI warning about our distortion, our misunderstanding about information. Nowadays, the totalitarian or the authoritarian regimes put lots of the resources to make some disinformation using the AI. So at first we have to understand the importance of this emerging technology and actively incorporate these elements in our strategy and the policy of the information. And secondly, how we can strengthen and make the strategic communication. Firstly, we have to, this is my personal view, firstly, we have to understand the importance of the information. And we recognize this is the lopsided, unfair field of the struggle of the information. Authoritarian regimes put lots of resources and not hesitate to distort the fact. But our society, based on the value of democracy, we cannot take that kind of strategy, distorting the fact. We always based on the fact. But still, we have to understand this kind of lopsided competition and put lots of the resources. Most of all, the problem I think is our current situation is too fragmented. Minister Imans mentioned of kind of some cooperation between the region. We need strengthen our cooperation between the democratic countries and between the regions to share same value and experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Liggis, have you heard the question properly? Are you ready to answer? Yes.
Let me start by also saying how happy I am to meet up with my good friend Ambassador Lee, this time not in person, but very much value the work that he's been doing as a great representative of South Korea in Latvia. But to revert to the question about, and I think it's a very good and important question, about the bonds between the countries that rely on the rule-based order and the public diplomacy, whether these bonds are being challenged. And it's quite clear that they are being challenged. And I think that we have to deal with the situation as best we can. We have a president of the United States who was democratically elected, according to the system within the United States. But we do face challenges relating to the rule-based order and relating to the manner in which public diplomacy is used. And because of that, I think it's important to note two things. First of all, within the European Union, we have faced similar challenges in dealing with Hungary, who has had a process, and I had been ambassador in Budapest for a few years. They went through a process of sliding away from democratic norms. And so the question was, how do we still engage with such a partner? And this has become even more important and crucial to all of us today in handling the United States current administration. But I think the lessons that we see taking place before us over the last few weeks are to be taken from President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer, the leaders of France and the United Kingdom, where we have seen the importance of engaging with Latvia's and other countries' most important strategic ally and dealing with the issues as they are appearing. And even if we look at the unfortunate meeting between President Zelensky, President Trump, and other members of the United States administration, we see that over a week the situation has already changed. So I think, first of all, let's not jump to speedy conclusions, but let's, looking at the long term, make sure that we continue to engage with our US partners and keep up the bonds relating to rule-based order and public diplomacy based on trust and truth.
Thank you. we have a very urgent time limit, but nevertheless, I'd like to give you some chances to raise questions. If you have any urgent, I will invite 2 more questions from you and next you, okay?
Thank you. My question was also on this digital diplomacy that Professor Choi talked about. I was wondering, how could governments effectively engage in this kind of public diplomacy without resorting to measures that can risk infringing on this freedom of speech, or at least make citizens feel like it is restricting their rights? Because I believe it's one of the very difficult aspects of fake news and this kind of narratives, that governments are trying to hide the truth from the citizens. So how can governments try to balance this aspect?
Thank you.
Thank you for the insightful discussions provided by all 4 of you. And I'd like to question, how could international corporations, including some embassies throughout the world, could mitigate the polarization that's happening right now?
Okay. So first question will be answered by Professor Chair. Second one will be answered by Ambassador Lee for 1 minute or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising such a difficult question. But I think that's a very meaningful question. Why? Because at the end of the day, a lot of people tend to regard public diplomacy something that is very similar to propaganda. Because by definition, public diplomacy is manufactured by government, and it's projecting toward a target audience. Could be foreign nationals or foreign governments, right? So therefore, it has to project through a lot of hurdles and impediment. And as you mentioned, fake news is one thing that is out there. But as I said throughout my remark, the credibility of public diplomacy or the effectiveness itself, ironically, really depends on how transparent the message could be. In other words, as long as the government projects so-called true message out there, and with the value of democracy, I think government should be able to be very confident about its own message, and thereby let the public decide rather than government trying to decide for them. So in other words, you have to be really confident. And the confidence essentially comes from how resilient you are and how strong you are in terms of your democratic value. I mean, if you are an authoritarian state and you're trying to project your public diplomatic message, my guess is that you're not really confident anyhow, because 9 out of 10, your message will be very much either overblown or essentially very decorative or cosmetic. Therefore, not many people will be persuaded by the message itself anyhow. So the wisdom is pretty simple, according to my experiences anyhow. You have to really be basic and transparent and confident, and let the public decide.
Thank you. Ambassador Lee.
Yeah, thank you. About the activity of the embassy, yeah, indeed, the government and every embassy around the world, they do their best, provide the reasonable or the trustworthy information. But Professor Choi properly pointed out, in the end, the public will decide. So I think the core element of the public diplomacy is trust building. So we have to take part, including you and me, as the public. We have to share our belief, our value through some internet or the close friend. And I think, of course, government and the embassy should do their role, but still the activities of the public will be more important. Thank you.
Thank you, presenters and discussants. It is time to conclude the session. I'm also teaching an international development cooperation course, and that is very deeply related to public diplomacy subject. In my view, there are two dimensions of public diplomacy. One is freedom values and democratic norms. To those values and norms to be achieved, I think one principle must be respected, as Minister Ligge suggested, the rule-based international society, the rule of law. If realistic, unilateral diplomacy is emphasized, then it could be very easily very arbitrary. But if multilateral participants are engaged to talk about on the basis of the principle of the rule of law, maybe we could make more rational and reasonable conclusion through the multilateral discussion. That is all about public diplomacy, and also to make the public make a proper conclusion. This is my plan. And next year, I hope I would like my center, Jongwon EU Center, hopes to deploy a very big, very grand public diplomacy forum as a part of a GEEF conference. So I will do my best to revive the eagerness and also passion of public diplomacy. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, for your insightful talk and for highlighting the importance of diplomatic engagement in crisis management. We'll now take a short break before final session at Grand Ballroom B.